activates. And neurons there on this very like simplistic level can't tell the difference between your pain and someone else's pain. Um, Big, amazing sort of footnote in there. Typically, people suffering from major depression, this part of the brain is overactive. It's just pain 24/7 wherever you look and that kind of thing. Okay, so it turns out that when people are stressed, they become less generous. They're more likely to cheat in an economic game. Their moral compass goes out the window. Their range of concern narrows down to people who look just like me and pray like me and eat like me and all that sort of stuff that we're way familiar with. Um, and it turns out what stress hormones are also doing is disrupting the functioning of this part of the brain. And there's like a drug you can give to rats or give to college freshman volunteers, which will block the effects of the stress hormone. And when you throw that in there, they maintain their empathy despite being stressed. They maintain all sorts of physiological markers of it. We're feeling less capacity to look at somebody else's pain and somebody else's perspective on the world when we're stressed, because what matters has turned into a very self-interested focus for most people. So, like, amid stress doing terrible things to your memory and your executive function and judgment and all sorts of stuff, this increasingly strikes me as this is the outpost that's really interesting.
One of the things that continues to come up in your work on stress is this, it's almost like an agentic view of what's happening to you. It's how much agency do you have? Is this kind of being imposed on me, or have I selected that this is going to happen? What is the role of agency and of volition when it comes to stress and how we interpret it?
Well, it falls under the rubric of how I think everything in the universe works, which is like there's no agency at all. There's no free will. In recent years, I've stopped spending most of my time futzing around with one neuron at a time and soaking in stress hormones, and getting much more interested in larger issues of biology, of who we are and how we got here, and our best moments and our worst moments and everything ambiguously in between. And when you spend enough time like obsessing over biology and how it interacts with environment and all the things that came before us that we had no control over, both biologically and environmentally, you reach this conclusion somewhere in there that there's no damn free will whatsoever. It is entirely a myth. So this is my current song and dance, trying to convince the world that this is how things work.
Well, if we want to increase the stress in everybody, at least for a short term, perhaps that's a nice little teaser for what we're going to get onto. Talk to me, because obviously short-term stress is useful, long-term stress not useful. Is there a line? Am I not supposed to be stressed after 8 hours and 35 minutes? When does short-term stress start to become bad?
Well, it depends on who you are and your place in society and what culture, and as long as we're at it, what species you are. And sort of the central concept in stress is like you get stuck in a traffic jam, you're stressed, you do this with this hormone, you turn off this other one, your blood pressure does whatever. And the amazing thing is, if you went back 100 million years and some like twerpy little dinosaur was being chased by someone terrifying, that dinosaur would have been secreting the precise same molecules that you do when you're stuck in traffic or thinking about global warming or who. It's an incredibly ancient piece of our like wiring. It's the same thing in us and other primates and mammals and fish and birds and reptiles and it's incredibly conserved stuff. And what it's been doing for like 150 million years or so is saving your life when you were facing a short-term physical crisis. Somebody is very intent on eating you. You're very intent on eating somebody else because you're starving. And everything that it does is get your body for dealing with the next 3 minutes of crisis. You're mobilizing energy from storage sites to deliver to the muscles that are saving your neck. You're increasing heart rate, blood pressure. You're turning off everything unessential in your body in the hopes that there is a later. You'll take care of it, like growth, tissue repair, immune surveillance, reproduction, all of that, all built around like triage everything that's not essential in the next 3 minutes. And then you get us smart primates, us humans who could anticipate our deaths, or some like low-ranking baboon who spends his entire life not being chased by lions but being hassled by higher-ranking guys. And what you've invented is this like totally corrosive, disastrous, chronic psychosocial stress. And you see this very simple outcome. You go sprinting for your life and your blood pressure is way, way elevated. This is a good thing. It's saving your life. You day after day deal with an abusive boss, or you have an anxiety disorder or whatever, and you're doing the same thing with your cardiovascular system, and you're going to blow it apart because the system didn't evolve for being turned on chronically. And for most beasts, it's either over with after 3 minutes or you're over with. And we're capable of doing this like for months, years on end. And that's not what the system evolved for. And that's why us and a few other primates are smart enough to get sick from psychological stress.
Yeah, the concept of being smart enough to get sick from psychological stress is an odd sort of twisting of the words, but I suppose it's very true, right? Because if we didn't have this unbelievable abstraction ability to be able to contemplate, am I really speaking my truth forward? Is this my highest actualization? Maybe that cookie that I ate yesterday really does say everything about me that I've always thought that it was. Ruminating about that weird thing you said to a teacher 15 years ago, whatever it might be that you're vacillating about. We are able to abstract our stresses and ruminate about them and continue to cause them to persist in our mind even when they're not there. So even if we're not being chased by said dinosaur or tiger or baboon, we can imagine all of the previous baboons and tigers and dinosaurs that we thought about getting chased from and still get the same physiological effect.
Yes, as well as remember our most incompetent, embarrassing social moments of our lives, as well as imagine that you're destined to do something like that over and over again in the future, as well as worry about a movie character. You watch somebody on a screen, or you read a novel, and you activate a stress response because, oh no, watch out, the bad guys are coming up behind you. Or you're heartbroken, at the end of a novel by some beloved character getting done in. Or worse, and most meaningfully, you sit there and you read about what's happening in Ukraine or Bangladesh, and you do the exact same thing. We're taking this 150 million year old circuitry, and we can abstract it over space and time like nothing that's ever walked this planet before.
Right. With this perspective, the kind of trite cliche of people saying humans are not meant to consume the entire world's catastrophes 24 hours a day in real time, this is presumably having a real, genuine impact on our stress response and therefore health outcomes, physiology, hormones, all of that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And, to show how similar things are and then how different, you take a female baboon. This was some great research done some years ago by some colleagues, and she has an infant, and the infant dies. There's a high infant mortality rate, and they could show up to a month later, not only is this female more socially withdrawn, doing less grooming, she has elevated stress hormone level. She is mourning for a month afterward. And that sure looks familiar, and often she will carry the body around for days afterward. Wow, that looks just like us. And then we do the same thing when we see that Bambi's mother was killed in the cartoon, and we're haunted by that for years. Whoa, we can take this very primate thing, my child has died, and we're feeling upset about an animated cartoon character. We're no, we could just extend it in ways that's unrecognizable to other species.
I learned from you that a third trimester fetus's brain development is impacted by the mother's socioeconomic status.
AG1 replaces multiple supplements with 75 high-quality ingredients scientifically formulated to give your body
How,
Insane.
like,
Absolutely insane.
you're born and you are already screwed by having picked the wrong road.
Take that from the top for me. Take that from the absolute top.
Okay, well, people used to realize poverty, social instability, being a peripheralized outgroup, the wrong ethnicity, the wrong race, the wrong all of those things. What your body pays a big price. In the United States, for example, if you are African American, on the average, your chromosomes are aging at an accelerated rate compared to everybody else, because stress hormones mess up the enzymes that keep your chromosomes young. And whoa, the chromosomes in your cells are falling apart faster. So, whoa, no surprise, no surprise. And when you look at health, socioeconomic status is a gigantic predictor. Am I assuming correctly you're in the UK?
Austin, Texas, but I was in
Oh
the
my
UK for
God.
a very long time. I'm an adoptee over here.
Okay, well, no wonder you've got that Texan accent. The classic Whitehall studies of civil servants in Britain and stuff, your socioeconomic rank has an enormous impact on your body, and it's got nothing to do with getting healthcare access. It's got very little to do with the fact that you can't afford your health club memberships. It's stress. It's the psychosocial effects of chronically having no control, no predictability, all of that. And then they figured out that the socioeconomic status of your family when you were a kid is predictive of all sorts of unhealthy stuff when you're 60 years old. And then, among other things, people got brain imaging techniques cool enough that they could now brain image a fetus and see how it's doing. And back came the finding that already as a fetus, your mother's socioeconomic status has an impact on your brain growth. How does that happen? Very simple. If you're poor and if you're chronically psychosocially stressed for any of a gazillion other reasons, you've got elevated levels of these stress hormones in your bloodstream. And they get through the placenta and they get to your fetus and have all sorts of effects while the fetus's body is learning what kind of world it is out there. Whoa, it's a scary one. It's an unpredictable one. These stress hormones having all sorts of effects on how you're constructing every output, including your brain. And it turns out some of the fanciest parts of your brain, your frontal cortex, etc., are very sensitive to these stress hormones, and their maturation is impaired by them.
Yeah, what are the outcomes? What are the sort of outcomes that you see from a mother that is low socioeconomic status, perhaps highly chronically stressed? What is the sort of brain or the sort of person that will be born out of that more than likely?
Well, this one isn't well understood yet because these are the first studies coming out. This is officially cutting edge neuroimaging techniques, but we already know a ton just a few years later. Get a kid by the time they're 5 years old going into kindergarten, and on the average, their family's socioeconomic status is already a predictor of this kid's resting stress hormone levels. How screwed is that? And on the average, it's already predictive of the maturation of the frontal cortex in this kid, how thick this cortical region is, what its metabolic rate is like. And one wonders, so what does this part of the brain do that I keep mentioning? It's the brain region that lets you be self-disciplined and long-term planning and impulse control and emotional regulation. I don't know, a lot of people will be familiar with the famed marshmallow test with 5-year-old kids. And oh my God, it's amazing. You get a 5-year-old who can't hold out for the second marshmallow, and they're on it within seconds and all of that. And this is predictive decades later of this kid's cumulative earnings over their lifetime, their adult socioeconomic status, their patterns of metabolic diseases, cardiovascular. Whoa, already at age 5, the die is not cast unchangeably, but it's already leaning in a fairly significant direction. By age 5, that's already a predictor of what things are going to look like as an adult in lots of these important realms. And by age 5, if you once again pick the wrong family to be born into, and you're already marinating in chronic psychosocial stress because your family's poverty, by age 5, you already have that profile that's predictive of that outcome that is on the less desirable side long afterward.
Absolutely insane. I had a Robert Plomin on the show. I've spent a good bit of time learning about behavioral genetics over the last couple of years, and what I'm really fascinated about is this odd intersection between nature and nurture. The fact that your parents are predisposed to behave in a way which creates the nurture. Their predisposition has to be inherited by you, at least in part, because that is the nature element of what's going on. So when you have this very odd blending, let's say that you have a mother who is predisposed to be a little bit more anxious. Okay, so perhaps you